All right. Let's get back to our conversation.
Yep.
Sorry, folks, but if one of you can go to facebook.com, amazingribs.com, and just post there that Facebook is not cooperating tonight. They want me to set up two-factor authentication, which I did a long time ago. But we are live on YouTube and Periscope with Twitter, and we're just going to have to muddle through. So, how you doing, JT?
I'm good, boss. How are you?
I'm good. I'd like to introduce my special guest tonight. JT, Jeff Tracy, and I have been talking to each other over the great airwaves of North America for many years. JT is the host of BBQ Nation, which is the only, I think, actual real radio broadcast about barbecue around the country, and not just one, but I think he's got somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 stations across the nation. He is often called the Cowboy Cook. He's a pretty capable griller as well as a radio person. He's interviewed anyone who's anyone on barbecue over the years, and we have a bunch of them archived on AmazingRibs.com in the Pitmaster Club. If you're a member, you can listen to a lot of his interviews with Aaron Franklin and Stephen Reichlin and Tuffy Stone and Amy Mills and Carolyn Wells and Meathead. And he's done an awful lot of things in the entertainment industry. He's been in movies. He had a reality show on Discovery Channel. Done a bunch of TV commercials. He's an old horseman, too. Every time we talk, he tells me about his days competing with horses. I don't think he's eaten them, though.
No, I have. Not one of mine, though.
You have? Oh. You know,
I've tasted horse meat.
Our friend Greg Rempe has got a running joke about horse meat, so I won't get into that.
Okay.
But he won a number of national championships in horse events. I don't know which ones. And just a good all-around fun guy who knows how to cook, I'll tell you that. So we thought, with Memorial Day coming up, we'd talk about things to cook for Memorial Day. I don't know about you guys. In most of the country, it's sort of the start of the barbecue season. And, folks haven't really quite warmed up with their full repertoire of brisket and ribs and everything. I think it's a perfectly good holiday. I think a lot of folks break out the burgers and the brats and the hot dogs and the chicken wings and stuff. So I thought we'd kick off with a little discussion about burgers and some tricks and techniques and some tips for cooking burgers. And then, after 20-30 minutes of that, of course, we'll take your questions. We'll open it up to whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about grills, smokers, brisket, whatever. So, tell us, JT, when you cook burgers, what kind do you like to cook? Do you like to cook the quarter pound, what I call diner burgers, or do you like to cook the 6 to 8 ounce, what I call steakhouse burgers?
Well, I like, depends on who I'm cooking for. If there are people I really like, I kind of custom make the burger patty. If they're just run-of-the-mill kind of coming through the line, then I'll just use 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 patties, because they cook pretty quick, and you can get through them. But if I'm at home and I'm entertaining, I tend to make them myself, and I'll put maybe some basil in them, or depending on what I'm feeling like that day, if I'm making patties. What I was going to tell you is, we were talking the other day on the show, and we talked a little bit about smash burgers.
Yeah.
That's the way we cooked them on the farm when I grew up. That's not a new technique. The smash burger, we've been doing that for a long time.
Really? I thought it was just something recent. What is a smash burger?
Well, you just got a ball of hamburger basically, and you put it on a hot skillet with a little oil in it, or a griddle if you have a griddle, and you get it. You kind of put that down, and it kind of browns the bottom, and they use like a meat press or a bacon press, and they squish it down, and then it caramelizes the bottom, and then you flip it like that, and it does the same thing on the other side. And that's the way my mom cooked them when I was a kid.
I think that's a clever technique. When you smash them down like that, you get that burger meat in really intimate contact with the hot metal.
Yeah.
Now you're cooking on a platen or a griddle or a pan. You're not cooking on a regular grill grate, right? When you do the smash them. And it kind of, you get this intimate contact between the meat and the metal. And metal is really hot, and it really transmits energy. So it's the most concentrated way to heat a burger in a hurry and get that great dark brown Maillard effect on the surface. That's pretty important if you've got a quarter pounder, because you don't want to leave it on there any longer than you have to. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a hockey puck. So you want pretty intense heat on that surface there. And this is a good way to get it. The other cool thing about the technique is that the burgers kind of fries in its own fat. The fat renders out, and you see it all around the edges. And another cool thing is that if you do it right, you smash it down right, you get these kind of jagged edges that are thin and contact with the hot metal, and they can get really crispy, and that's pretty fun. That's
it's kind of cool too, Meathead, that when you flip them and you've got those jagged edges, and you and I were talking about like using Kraft single slices to melt. That kind of runs down in those little crevices, and it gives it a really interesting. I'm into food pictures, like you are, and it gives a real interesting look on the edges of the burger if you put cheese on it that way. That's kind of off in the weeds for some people, but it's kind of cool.
So you ever cook a big, thick 8-ounce steak burger?
Oh yeah. I did some yesterday. They were just under 8 ounces. I did them on the morning TV show I do up here in Portland, and just season them. But those I do on a grill.
Yes, me too.
Yeah,
not a griddle,
but on a grill, and did that and showed them how to do it. And there's another thing, and maybe who was our first guy to sign up here today? Was it Barbecue Chuck? Is that what his name was?
Yeah, he's some Big Chuck's Barbecue makes me think he owns a barbecue restaurant.
Okay. It's interesting thing I see in some of the restaurants and places. Well, they have a little lid, and when they'll flip the burgers over, not only on a flat top but also on a grill, they'll put a little lid over it. It looks like a little stainless steel bowl like that.
Yeah.
Creates that kind of convection heat in there like that, but it's very close. That's pretty interesting too, the effects of that.
Yeah, that's like closing the lid on the grill, only it keeps that heat in close and tight. You get to cook it from above as well as below. And when you've got a thicker piece of meat, you just can't count on the energy from below cooking it all the way through.
No.
It might, but then again, by the time it gets cooked in the center, there's a good chance it'll burn on the outside if it's thick. So you close the lid of the grill, or I've seen restaurants have them. It's like a metal mixing bowl with a handle on it. I just take a metal mixing bowl. I also use that technique, by the way, for oysters and clams. You get an oyster down there, and you throw a lot of sawdust on the fire, and it gets a big billowing smoke. But they cook so darn fast, you really don't get the smoke onto the meat of the oyster or the clam. So if you put that upside down mixing bowl on top of them, it captures that smoke, and that gets it into the oyster or the clam. It's a good, very good technique.
One of the things that I like to do, and this is just me personally, we talked about this on the show too, is I'm a big fan of Worcestershire sauce, good old-fashioned Lee and Perrin Worcestershire sauce. And after, I've cooked it on the one side, I flip it over. Now I know it doesn't soak in or anything; it kind of just puddles there on top. But I'll put a little bit of Worcestershire on it, and then I put my cheese on top of it like that. That's my little way I like to do it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of mixing liquid in though.
Right.
If you mix the Worcestershire in, you're asking for a burger that's going to fall apart.
Right.
So all right, let's talk about burger mix.
Okay.
What do you buy when you buy burger meat? You buy ground beef, ground chuck. What do you ask the butcher for? Or what do you pick up from the counter?
I like ground beef. In fact, I did some ground brisket a couple days ago. But normally I like ground beef, and I like the 80-20 mix.
Let me just contradict ever so slightly. When you buy something labeled ground beef, you're buying the lowest grade mix that they have. You want to buy something called ground chuck or ground sirloin, where they name the section. Ground beef is lips and assholes. And hamburger also. You don't want to buy something that says hamburger or ground beef. That's just the lowest grade of the trim. But I'm really with you on the 80-20 blend. Absolutely.
Yeah, as I told you, I got a new toy for Christmas. A big commercial KitchenAid thing, and it's got a meat grinder in it attachment. And so I've been saving all my trim from like when I get whole New York strips, and then I grind it up myself. So it's not just the crappy burger part not the lips and assholes you were talking about.
Yeah.
It comes out much better.
Yeah, and that's a really good technique. If you can, almost all the top burger places claim that it's really essential to grind it yourself same day. And the reason is that meat and the fat in the meat, they react with oxygen. They oxidize, and fat can get rancid. Meat turns brown. And so if you grind it fresh, there's a different flavors. It's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable. And I know places, burger joints, that grind twice a day, or in the morning and then in the afternoon, to get really fresh. And now here's a really interesting trick. When you go to a slaughterhouse, it's an assembly line or a disassembly line.
Sure.
And it's fast, it's bloody, it ain't pretty. The steers, the cattle, wander around in a feedlot before they're slaughtered, and there's often a lot of poop on the ground. If it's dry, and it often is, it gets dusty, it gets on their coat, and then they're slaughtered, and they're slaughtered painlessly. This is not torture. They're slaughtered painlessly. It's just not pretty. Right. And then they're bled. The throat sliced, and the blood comes out. So there's no blood left in the animal. But there is contamination on the surface from outside. And if the knife is contaminated, which it often is from slicing through the skin, if the butcher accidentally cuts into the intestines and they spill out, there's contamination on the knife from that. It can splatter up on the meat. And so when you cut these meats up, there's often small amounts of bacterial contamination on the surface. If the room is kept cold, which it is, it's very small and it's not likely to be hazardous. But, if it's left on the loading dock at the grocery store for a few hours, those bacteria can take off. The good news is if you cook a steak, they're all on the surface. The bacteria are too large to penetrate into the muscle fibers. So the hot grill or griddle will kill them almost instantly. So you don't have to worry too much about contamination on a whole steak or a chop or muscle meat. But if you take that steak and grind it, now you're mixing up the surface and the interior. And if there is contamination, it can be on the inside. So, you can cook a steak to 130 degrees, which is medium rare. But you probably shouldn't cook a burger to under 155 to make sure that it's perfectly safe. You don't want to send Granny or one of your kids to the hospital on Memorial Day. But 155 is gray. It's not pink in the center. And a lot of water can evaporate in that process, and it can get dry. So how do you solve this problem? And here's how you do it. You buy your steak. You go to the store and you pick up a chuck steak or something that looks to be about 20% fat. You bring it home, and you get a pot of water boiling. And you take that chuck steak and you dunk it in that pot of water for about 20 seconds. What you're doing is you're killing the bacteria on the surface, just like if you threw it on the grill. You're pasteurizing it. You're making it safe. Now you pull it out, and it's gray on the surface, but you haven't really harmed it at all. And you grind it yourself. You get that gadget that JT has. And a KitchenAid, if you have a KitchenAid, they make a grinder attachment that works pretty well. And you grind it yourself, and you want a coarse grind. You don't want a fine grind. You grind it yourself, and you have pasteurized meat. So now you can form your patty, and you can cook it to medium rare, and you can rest pretty darn comfortable in the fact that it's safe. Now another technique to make sure you get safe is to buy irradiated meat, and that's meat. Trying to think of the name of the company. Actually, I just got a brochure from them the other day. Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks sells pasteurized burgers, and what they do is they expose it to low levels of safe irradiation. This is not going to make it, kryptonite, or it's not going to glow in the dark. It's not going to give you radiation. It's perfectly harmless. I mean, radiation is all around you. It's not even as strong as X-rays, but it's enough to kill the bacteria. So if you buy irradiated beef, it's pasteurized, it's safe. You can cook it you can eat it raw. It's not recommended, but you can. If you're going to do quarter pounders, almost certainly they're going to cook to a safe temperature, which the USDA says is 155. Now, if you want to cook to safe temp 155, or if you're cooking quarter pounders, which I just call hockey pucks, you might want to bump up your blend to 75-25 or 70-30, which is to say more fat, because there's two sources of moisture in a burger: water and fat. And fat is not only a source of moisture, it's a source of flavor. So if you bump up the ratio of fat, even if you cook it to 155, it's going to be juicy. It's going to run down your arm. So those are some of the tricks to getting really good, juicy, yet safe meat.
No, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And I really have gotten into grinding my own burger, if you will. I haven't tried to make sausage yet, because we've got two manufacturers of German and Polish and stuff that are within 5 miles of me, so it's easier to just go buy them there. But as far as the burgers, I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is you get to hand select, if you will, what you put in it. So if you see a piece of bruised or even a piece of fat with the USDA ink stamp on it, you don't want that in there, you can throw it out. It's just little things like that.
Well, and I got to say, when you look at it from 30,000 feet, A burger is a sausage. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just ground meat. And now a lot of us mix flavor in there. You can mix garlic salt, garlic powder, not garlic salt, garlic powder, black pepper, onion powder, anything you want, you can mix in there except salt. Don't mix salt into your burgers. Professor Blonder, who is a food scientist that works with us, did some really interesting experiments that we have on AmazingRibs.com, but it compacts the meat and it makes it tougher. So don't mix salt into your burger. Mix whatever flavorings you want in there, form your patty, and then just before you cook it, sprinkle the salt on the surface and surface only. I got to interrupt briefly and ask a favor. I think Big Al was the one who pointed out that Facebook wasn't working. For those of you who heard me mumbling and cursing earlier, I went to Facebook to see why, and I got a sign there. It says, you can't access your page, because I've been accessing the page every day. We need to set up two-factor. I set up two-factor. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm not going to waste your time screwing around with Facebook. But typically when we have these little happy hours, fireside chats, we get a good crowd from Facebook. If one or two of you would do me the favor of going to facebook.com/AmazingRibs and just post a message that we have technical problems with Facebook, but we're live over at youtube.com/AmazingRibs. Maybe some of those folks who want to join in won't be too pissed at me, and we'll come on over to YouTube and join in. Otherwise, I'm going to get emails tomorrow. I apologize. So, are you one of these guys, JT, that plays with different cuts? I know that I've interviewed some folks who say, I use 50% brisket and 20% chuck and 20% short ribs. And do you play with them at all?
Not really, because most of the stuff that goes in my trim bags is either from strip loins or from ribs. Mm-hmm. You know, what people call prime ribs. But that's really what it is. I mean, once in a while I'll get a chuck roll or something, but most of the time it's the strips or the ribs like that.
You know,
I don't mess around with it too much.
That's a really good point. Elsewhere on YouTube, we have some videos of me showing you how to buy a whole rib primal. I mean, you know, this is a big sucker. And how to break it down into ribeye steaks, roasts, stew meat, and so on. But there is trim. In order to make it look and cook right, there is trim. And the same thing with a strip steak primal or filet mignon. Mm-hmm. Whatever, if you buy a large cut, which is a very economical way to go, and learn how to break it down yourself, there's going to be trim. And you want to save that trim, and that goes into your burger meat or your sausage meat. And I started to say earlier, when I said burgers are just a form of sausage, you can grind up your burgers and you make your mix there, but you can also do stuff like throw in hot peppers and herbs, and now you've got a sausage blend. And, you know, sausages, I'm sure you know, don't have to go into casing. You can make sausage patties, and you go down to Texas and they have what they call hot guts. And hot guts are primarily beef sausage. There's usually some pork blended in, but they're primarily beef sausage. And if you're using the KitchenAid does have a stuffing attachment. So after you've ground it with your KitchenAid, you take off the grinding assembly and clean it up, and you can put on the stuffing assembly. Stuffing assembly doesn't work as well as the grinding assembly. It's a bit of a pain, but it works. And you can get the pork casings, which are about the right size for a good 1-inch sausage. And you just slide them onto this cone, and feed the ground meat into it and press it through, and you can make sausages. You're shocked. It's pretty cool, pretty easy, even for a beginner, and it's a lot of fun. And you can play with your own blends, or I've got recipes on my site, and there's others out there that are specialty sites devoted to sausage making, and you can make some really fun stuff, some really good stuff. I mean, there's a really good recipe for andouille sausage, which is one of my favorites on our site. So it's fun to play with those grinders if you got one. And you don't need a KitchenAid. There's old-fashioned hand crank cast aluminum grinders like your grandma used to use. They just clamp on your kitchen table, and they're maybe $30. So away you go.
I've still got the one my mom had when I was a kid. Because this is off the sausage and burger topic, but that's how my mom would also grind her stuffing at Thanksgiving. She'd have all this dried bread, and she'd run it through that hand crank like that, and then she'd have this big bowl. And it wasn't all real fine powdery because it didn't chop it up that much, but there were chunks. And so that's the way she made stuffing when I was a kid. So I kept it after all these years. It's going to go in the Smithsonian one of these days because it's that old. But.
Yeah, I've used it for tomatoes too.
What I was also going to say, Meathead, was when you're trimming, like if you get a big primal and you're trimming it, I actually have two piles. I have a trim pile and I have a stew meat pile. Because I like to make stews in the winter out here. And so I get much more trim than I do stew meat, but if I'm doing 2 or 3 things in one day, I'll have a nice little bag of stew meat to go with it. So
I got some good comments over here and questions. Big Al, thank you for going over to Facebook on my behalf. Cat Steele is saying, buy steaks at Costco that are blade tenderized. Blade tenderizing is an interesting technique. What they do is, do I have one around? No, I don't. You get really tough cuts of meat that are cheap grades, and there are machines that have like needles, rows of needles, like 100 needles, and they're somewhere between a needle and a blade. Maybe they're a 16th of an inch wide, but they go into the meat, chop, 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 and they cut the fibers and the connective tissues, tenderizing it. And it works. I mean, you can take a tough cut of meat and tenderize it by blade tenderizer. And there's a device you can buy on the market called a jacquard. It fits in your hand, and it's got 3 rows of blades, and they work. And it's a great technique if you're doing a stew or something. The problem is, remember we were talking about contamination. If you've got a steak and the surface is contaminated when you throw it on the grill or in the griddle, it pasteurizes it. But if you've blade tenderized, you've pushed any contamination from the surface down into the center. So you don't want to buy a steak that is blade tenderized and cook it to medium rare, because now you're running a risk. And, nothing in life is risk-free. There's no such thing as risk-free food. But if you follow good, safe practices, you can get through life without getting sick or killing anyone. And blade tenderizing just increases the risk. So Cat Steele here is saying, use blade tenderized meat, which is a cheaper cut, and use that for your ground beef. Great idea. Great idea. Go down to the store, buy blade tenderized. And you can buy, often it's a very lean cut, like rump. Very lean. Now, that doesn't make a good burger. You want fat. But if you've cooked a brisket lately, then you should be trimming most of the fat off the surface. You should not leave all that fat on the surface of a brisket, or a prime rib, or any big primal. So you trim that fat off and you freeze it. And so now you go out and you buy some blade tenderized rump steak, and you take your frozen brisket fat and you mix it with your blade tenderized rump steak, and you get a 70-30, 60, or 75-25 blend, and away you go. And it could be darn good. It is a very good technique. If you don't have fat in your freezer, which I do, much to my wife's chagrin, you can often ask your butcher. This is like that famous what was that movie? The golf movie with Chevy Chase and the little kid sit. You're gonna eat your Caddyshack. Thank you. How can I forget Caddyshack? You're gonna eat your fat. You can go to your butcher and say, "You got any fat?" You know, you can ask your butcher for fat, for trim. I mean, they take it, they trim it, and they throw it away. And you want to get white fat if you can. It's better than yellow fat. And you can ask the butcher for fat, and they'll give it to you. It doesn't cost anything.
I got a story about that, Meathead.
Go for it. I love your stories, pal.
Okay, so this is 15 years ago or so. It was really the last Christmas we had at our ranch before I sold it and moved my mom into a retirement facility and all that. So I do this big rib roast, and I trimmed it, and everybody's enjoying it, and twice baked potato and all that stuff. And on my brother's cut, I gave him kind of an extra thick piece with a lot of spinella out there, and all that, and there was some extra fat on it. And he's sitting at the end of the table just enjoying the hell out of it. And his wife goes, "You shouldn't eat that. It's bad for you. Bad for your heart. You shouldn't eat that." Okay? Nobody thought much about it. A few minutes later, we get done with dinner, and I get up, and I'm starting to clear the table, and I walk into the kitchen from the dining room, and there she is, with a whole platter of fat, and she's stuffing it in her mouth as fast as she could. She looked like a little chubby chipmunk there, and she had it running down her chin and stuff. And I said, "Yeah, Suze, isn't that bad for you or something?" And she went,
You shouldn't eat that. You should leave it for me.
But she ate all of it.
Well, I mean, when you trim fat off, what you're doing is you're allowing the ability of your spice rubs and other things to get to the surface of the meat. But a little bit of fat there, I mean, who doesn't revel occasionally in that crispy, thin layer of fat? I mean, it is just, delicious. So, I'm looking over at Big Al, and he's asking, on a smash burger, do you think it matters much if you put butter or bacon grease or tallow or oil on the griddle first? I'm not sure I notice much difference. No, I don't either. If you've got an 80-20 or higher blend, as soon as that sucker hits a hot griddle, most of the smash burgers places keep their griddles at around 350 to 375. And if you're serious about smash burgers, you need one of these. And this is okay. JT, you're safe.
Okay.
This is a infrared thermometer, and that red beam is just a laser. It helps you aim. But you aim this at the hot griddle or the frying pan, and it'll tell you the temperature of the surface. It's not good for measuring meat temperature, but if you're a pizza cook, this is a great way to check the temperature of your pizza stone, and you don't want the stone too hot, you don't want it too cold, and frying pans and griddles. And if you get your frying pan and griddle up to 350, 375 or so, one of these, and there are inexpensive ones and there's expensive ones, but that's really helpful if you're going to be a burger fanatic. And up around 350 or so, the internal fat just renders out really quick. Butter burns. Butter browns. Now, sometimes you want that. I mean, there's several fish recipes that require brown butter, and that's a good idea. But I would put butter down. Now, bacon grease, I'll put it on my pillow at night. Bacon grease, this sounds heretical, and especially to people who are very concerned about their health, but bacon grease is great on vegetables, broccoli and asparagus in a pan with some bacon grease, and that really brings out the flavors. So I might think about a little bacon grease, just to add the bacon flavor. So I don't see a need to do that on a smash burger. And in fact, part of the concept of the smash burger, you've got this golf ball sized piece of meat. You're slamming it down on hot metal. I don't think I want a layer of oil in the way. I want the meat right on the hot metal. So that I wouldn't worry about it. And Hungry House points out that Steak and Shake has been smashing burgers for generations. Yes, they have. And I'll tell you, with all the chic, fancy Manhattan smash burgers and burger joints on the market, there's a Steak and Shake not far from me, and they make a quarter pounder as well as anybody, better than McDonald's, anybody. But, I've just not turned on by them. Really, it's all about the toppings on those things. The meat is such a minor part of the flavor. Put me down as a Burger King guy, not as a quarter pounder guy.
So I got a question for you, Meathead.
Yeah.
You just hit on something there. Toppings. Okay. I'm a adventurous guy when it comes to food, but on my burgers, I like, basic cheese, onions, tomato, maybe a little secret sauce. Other words for Thousand Island.
Lettuce,
pickle, whatever you want, like that. I don't get into these burgers when you go into these whatever flavor of the month club restaurant just opened, where the burger is 15 inches high, and you've got eggs and bacon and
kimchi
or whatever it is.
Yeah, no kimchi for you?
No kimchi. Well, kimchi's okay by itself, but not on a burger. I wanted your thoughts on that.
I agree. I am a bacon, lettuce, tomato guy. I don't bother with the pickles. I like them. I don't even. I'm not even a big fan of cheeseburgers. I like to taste the meat without a bunch of stuff in the way. But I will say, please, everybody in a hearing distance, go to AmazingRibs.com. Find my recipe for burger glop. It's my secret sauce, and it's really good. It's got all the. As JT said, it's like a Thousand Island. The basic, secret sauce is ketchup, mayo, and mustard. Often with some pickle relish mixed in. I don't throw the pickle relish in there, but I substitute a Kansas City style red barbecue sauce for the ketchup, and it really works. It really amps it up. There's also a little hot sauce and a couple other goodies in there, but it just really brings a burger to life, I think. So go try my burger glop recipe. It may be one of the best recipes on our website. But let's see. And I tell you, when it comes to cheese, what's your cheese, JT?
Well, we talked about that the other day on the show. I like, for hamburgers, like you, I like American singles.
Kraft singles.
If I'm going to eat a piece of cheese, I'll eat a piece of smoked Gouda or, something like that. But if I'm going to cook with it, or even toasted cheese sandwiches, it's the American singles. But I told you I like the Swiss singles. Now, I'm pretty sure that's all 40 weight oiled with a little food dye and compressed. But regardless, that's what I like on my burgers and sandwiches.
Yeah, I think Kraft singles is one molecule from plastic. But but I love them. I mean, it's just, when it comes to a cheeseburger, it's got to be Kraft singles for me. And I have Swiss singles and other singles around the house as snacks. Late in the afternoon, if I'm getting hungry, I'll just pull out a slice of cheese. Or I have real cheese also around the house, quite a bit. I'm a cheese fan. But God, I mean, Kraft singles on a burger, that's the one. How about you guys in the audience? What do you guys? If you're a cheeseburger person, what do you put on? While we're waiting for responses. Okay. Frank Olson, I've been using only smoked salt lately before putting them on. My favorite is alderwood. Do either of you have a favorite salt flavor you have used or that you use or have used? You know, you're better than me, Frank. I like flavored salts, but when I start sprinkling them on food, the flavors seem to get lost. I've got a decent palate, but I don't taste the smoke that much, or any other seasonings. The burger meat and all the other stuff, the burger glop and everything, just seems to cover it over. Are you a flavored salt guy there, JT?
Not so much on my burgers, but what I like it on is my sliced tomatoes.
Oh, okay. Now there's what. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that on my sliced tomatoes, or even though I'm a 100% carnivore, but sometimes my snacks are vegetables, and I love like just little cauliflower florets. And if they're still damp from rinsing them off, I'll put some, seasoning salt or a different flavored salt, or there's a Johnny seasoning product called Salad Elegance, and it's got some paprika and different stuff in it, and I'll do that. And so there's where I like to use my flavored salts.
I use them on hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah.
For a late afternoon snack, I'll grab a hard-boiled egg and then I'll sprinkle seasoned salt. And I always keep seasoned salt with smoked salt as a base around.
Yeah.
And big flake. If I'm going to use a finishing salt, I want the big flake.
Right.
I got news for you guys. Sea salt. All salt comes from the sea. There is no federal regulation for sea salt. If you make a product and you throw in salt, you can label it sea salt and nobody's going to arrest you. So if you see sea salt on the label, you should probably expect to pay more because everybody thinks sea salt's more expensive. But it could be just plain old ground up sodium chloride. And that's legal. Absolutely, and I know this because I don't know if I've mentioned it here before, but my company is coming out with a line of rubs, and we've got salts in them, smoked salts and other salts, and we did a whole bunch of tastings and blending and research as to how we can label it. So don't get sucked into this sea salt bogus stuff. I've read, Wallace Marbach says, I've read plenty about not packing your burgers so they stay loose and tender, but they end up falling apart, and it feels like a waste of effort to grind your own and see it fall between. Oh boy, I know what you're up against.
Yeah.
The idea there is it's not so much tender, is you don't want to work them too much, and here's where the artistry comes in, knowing what's too much and what's not enough. If you want some air pockets in there, so when the fat melts, it doesn't run off; it gets stuck inside the meat, and that gives you moisture. But you're right. If you just take it right out of the grinder and loosely fabricate it, it's going to fall apart. You just gotta experiment, and this is what I do, and a lot of recipe writers and cookbook authors do, is we experiment. I'll grind up some lean sirloin and grind up some fat, and then I'll take them and work them together, and I'll do a burger or two that are tightly packed, loosely packed, 70-30, 75-25, I've done 60-40, 80-20, and you just do a whole bunch. It's a fun afternoon. I mean, it's a really bring your spouse in there or your kids in there and set up an experiment. Get a little piece of paper and label them, and then cook them in a frying pan and taste them, and try to keep the variables down, and get to the point where you've learned how much packing you can get away with. But the whole idea is keep it as loose as you can without it falling apart, because falling apart's a pain in the ass. And you can keep them. You can put binders in there like bread or eggs, but now you're making meatloaf. And a good steak burger should take like steak. Frank Olson, with burgers, I have been using only I read that already. Big Al said Facebook took his post off, for crying out loud. I hate Facebook. Frank Olson's cheese is Kraft, provolone, and or Havarti. They're good melting cheeses. And they have nice flavors. Big Al, I'm with you, pal. I think the bun is the most neglected item for burger making, and more important than the type of cheese. I know people argue with you on that, but since I'm not a big cheeseburger fan, I'm on your side. I think the bun's important. Big Al, what's your favorite bun? And how about you, JT?
Well, I'll tell you what's not my favorite is when they come up with these like brioche and these types of things. Don't have a heart attack on me now.
I like brioche.
Well, I like it too. I just don't like it for burgers. Okay. I'm a very traditionalist when it comes to burgers. Sorry if I disappoint people, but I am. I just like the old kind of white bread. I don't like the little tiny burgers or buns that they sell. I like the full size ones where you get a full patty, and especially if you're going to make your own burger patties like we've been talking, they'll fit those bigger buns. Or if you buy a 3-to-1 patty, if you're buying pre-mades, they'll fit those too. But I really like just the plain kind of white bread bun. That's me.
I like them too. All right, bun criteria. It's got to be big enough for the burger, 4 inches at least. It's got to hold up through the entire dining session. And that means if you've got a really juicy burger, it's got to be able to soak up the juice and not fall apart.
Right.
If you like it toasted, and I do, it's got to be able to take a nice toast and add a little flavor.
Yeah.
Now, I do really like brioche. I like brioche because they're buttery, and I like butter.
Yeah.
And I will butter it or even margarine it. And then I'll throw it on the grill and toast it and get some grill flavor on there. I'm not a big fan of pretzel buns for burgers. I love pretzel buns, but they're a little tough, and they tend to make chewing through them and ripping and stuff hard. How
do you feel about like potato buns?
Well, I'm looking at Wallace Murdoch, and I don't really know what potato buns are like. I'm not familiar with them. And I know that they're a standard, and I just need to buy some, because every time I talk burgers, there's Wallace Marbach and others like him who just say potato rolls. And he's talking about Marty's with sesame seeds. And he also likes American cheese, but he'll go with the deli counter sliced variety. And that's 2 molecules away from plastic, whereas Kraft is only 1 molecule away from plastic. Big Al likes a variety of buns. Key is fresh. Onion rolls. I love onion rolls. They tend to be a bit plushy and soft for burgers, but for a quarter pounder, and I first of all, I just love onions in any shape or form. He likes pretzel. Plain, good is fresh. Yeah, good if fresh. Yeah, absolutely. Fresh is important. Then the prep, toast or steam. I've steam is good, but it does tend to make the buns soft and easy to fall apart. Kevin Broderick likes to put Wagyu tallow as a spread for toasting the buns. My goodness, that sounds really tantalizing. And Frank Olson likes French rolls. We had some very thin sliced ribeye that my wife loves to cook in a hot griddle on a couple of buns tonight that I garlic toasted. I just took butter and garlic and mixed them together in the microwave and spread it on the buns. Got them nice and brown and crispy and put the steaks on them, and they were fun.
So let me ask you, while you're reading the next question, when you've cooked a ribeye, or even in New York, something like that, and you have some leftover, I'll tell you what I do with them. I slice them up. I put them in some au jus on the stove. Just let them heat softly with the au jus, and I make the French dips out of them the next day. I put fresh onions and provolone on them, and they're great. I just wanted to know what you do in a situation like that.
That stuff usually goes into the grind box bag. I don't normally cook it. My wife is Southside Italian, and very thin sliced ribeye steak sandwiches is part of her heritage. It frightened me when I first saw her do it, but she's got me used to it now. Okay. We're running low on comments and questions on burgers. We can jump to any time you want, any topic you want. You want to talk hot dogs, you want to talk pellet smokers. Oh, there was that thing about pellet smokers here a second ago. Have you compared a stick burner against a pellet smoker? I'm worried pellets don't give the smoke like the splits. Yes, you're right, Kevin. Absolutely, among all the, all right, let's try to get the hierarchy right. For optimum flavor, including smoke flavor, the lowest on the totem pole is an electric smoker. It gives a nice smoke, but the smoke smolders. It doesn't combust. And combustion, burning, yellow flame, blue flame, is when you get the best flavor smoke. So electric is the lowest on the totem pole. Moving up a notch, I would say gas, but gas can be very good. And in fact, the vast majority of your barbecue joints today are using Southern Prides and what's the other one, JT, the big brand of gas-fired smoker, Old Hickory. Southern Pride and Old Hickory. Okay. And they're gas-fired, but they throw logs in there for smoke. So gas alone is not going to produce any smoke flavor. It's neutral. But it doesn't produce so you can get a really good flavor from gas with good logs. Pellet smokes, it's interesting. The pellets are so efficient, they burn really cleanly, that there's people who buy pellet smokers say that they like them a lot, especially for their convenience. Set it and forget it. Set it for $2.25, walk away and come back in 18 hours, and your brisket is perfect. The flavor is very mild. I like to say it's like a string quartet, whereas if you're burning logs, you're getting a brass band. When you burn logs, you get a variety of gases, combustion gases, from the center of the wood, the bark, from wood that is burnt down almost to charcoal, from wood that is still just starting to ignite. All of those things give off different aromas and flavors. So you've got a big brass band going on. And I think log cooking is absolutely the best flavor, but it's absolutely the biggest pain in the butt to do. You buy an offset cooker, and I don't care how good it is, you better be prepared to hang around. Bring a book, bring a bunch of beers, bring a big, soft, comfortable lawn chair, and just set up shop next to that baby. Use a good thermometer and keep an eye on the temps and keep feeding it logs. But if you're willing to do that, the flavor is unmatched. And my favorite stick burner is called the BBQ. And I'm not going to get into the details on that, but it is weird. It is a extraordinary, clever engineering feat where the logs sit above the food, burn, form glowing embers, and the smoke is pulled through the glowing embers so that the impurities are burned off as the smoke goes through the embers down into the cooking chamber where the meat is. And it's just absolutely magnificent blue smoke. It's called the BBQ, and I have a detailed review about it on AmazingRibs.com. Bill Carew, the guy who invented it, is I think he's a nuclear engineer. Just a brilliant design. Not cheap, and you got to sit there all day. It's not automatic, but it's worth it.
Well, I'll tell you, Meathead, I've still got the original stick burner that I bought 25, 30 years ago. $149 from Home Depot. It's called the New Brunsville.
Oh,
you know, and then they
a classic.
Continue, but yeah,
renowned.
And I've got that out behind my shed. I can't tell you how many tri-tips I've cooked in that thing over the years, and briskets and stuff. And for $149, which I don't think they're that anymore, I think they're probably substantially more. But
I don't even know if they make New Braunfels anymore. I think they've been sold and sold again and sold again.
Maybe they have, but I mean, it's named after a town there in Texas, so you know. But I think that was the best $150 I ever spent.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah. Whoa! What'd I do?
Where'd you go?
I just hit the wrong button. That's all. Easy to do. Oh, look, we're on the opposite sides.
Hey.
God, this technology.
You gotta quit moving here.
Just don't touch anything, Meathead. Just sit back, drink your wine, and don't fucking touch anything.
So I want to tell you something. And maybe this will prompt some questions. Yesterday on the show I was doing, I shared your tip. I knew about it before you told me, but I shared your tip of making what I called the Trinity, the cross at the end of the sausage or hot dog.
Yeah.
And people loved that idea.
Yeah.
They absolutely, I got probably a half a dozen emails over that
you get a hot
after
dog.
The show was over.
Let's see if I can get a hot dog, and you put a cross. Zip.
Yeah.
Zip. And what happens is that end of the hot dog kind of peels open like a flower, and those edges get really crunchy and crispy, and it's a great way to cook a hot dog. I wish I could claim to have invented that. A little Chicago hot dog joint taught me that.
But it's a great tip.
Yeah, it is. Pardon the pun.
Yeah. Well, I had a bunch of jokes to tell about it, but they won't let me tell them on live TV. So you know,
this is the internet, YouTube. I have not been censoring my language. Feel free to tell stories. You're a great storyteller. You're a great storyteller.
When you grab your weenie and you put the Trinity sign in the end of your weenie, it expands. It doesn't blow up on you.
If you're going to tell a dirty joke, tell a good one, for Christ's sake.
I will.
Trying to think what else we need to talk about hot dogs. I will occasionally mix some onions in them, but if you start putting wet things inside your hamburger, you're asking for it to fall apart. So steer careful around Worcestershire and onions and other things inside the meat. And now there's a lot of places that do something fun, and that is they'll take the onions. Well, you've seen it at White Castle, and there's a bunch of places in Oklahoma where they'll take the onions and throw them down on the griddle and start them melting and going translucent, and then they'll throw the smash burger on top of the onions and smash it down, and the onions stick to the burger and permeate the burger with flavor. That's a fun technique. This is going to be weird, but goober burgers, I think they originate in Oklahoma, but it's a burger with peanut butter on top. And please, don't shoot, but they ain't bad. They're kind of in it. Of course, I like peanut butter on anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to maybe really take a small bite and render judgment after that, because I love peanut butter too, but that's just like two food groups that don't go together to me, peanut butter and hamburgers. But I'm willing to try it.
I have on AmazingRibs.com a hierarchy, or I should say a taxonomy of burgers, where I try to classify all the different burger styles. I mean, there are many different burger recipes right on the same block. Two restaurants will have very creative recipes, but there's the steamed burger, there's the goober burger, and the onion burger, and so on and so on. And I think I got them all. And they're kind of fun to look at, and you might want to play with them. I mean, that'd be a great theme for a party. Is cook 10 different burger styles. Frank Olson just set me off. Banana peppers on everything. Hey, one of the great burger styles in the world is the green chili cheeseburger from New Mexico. That is a combination that is unparalleled. At the basic level, they'll take the New Mexico chili, or there are a couple of varieties that are similar if you can't find it, and they'll just throw it on a griddle and soften it up and put it on a burger. Works great. But the experts will screw with it. They'll take that chili, and they'll chop it up with some onions and some garlic and some vinegar and some hot pepper, and they'll stir it all around on the griddle, and that'll go on top of the burger. And I tell you, when I was in New Mexico, I hooked up with Harry Sue, and some of you may know that name, a really talented barbecue chef out of California. We were both speaking at an event, and so we flew in and we drove around for a couple of days, and we ate nothing but green chili cheeseburgers. And we never had two alike, and we never had a bad one. Oh my, they are so good. You want to have some fun. I think it's far superior to a cheeseburger. Top it with the green chili. You won't find the typical chili that they use in New Mexico, but you can find things close. The Anaheim is close. Make some green chili cheeseburgers. And they'll down there, they'll not just stick with the one chili sometimes. They'll mix in a serrano or a jalapeno. There's just all kinds of creativity, and you can take it and run with it your own way. Lot of fun. Thank you for the reminding me of that, Frank. Hound Stuff is saying Juicy Lucy. The Juicy Lucy is a classic out of Minnesota. The Juicy Lucy is you take two thin burgers and you put a piece of cheese in the middle, and then you pinch it along the edges so they form a pocket, and then you grill that, and then you better goddamn wait a couple of minutes, because if you bite into that, I guarantee you're going to blister your tongue, because when that cheese melts and hits your tongue, it's going to burn like heck. But if you wait a couple minutes and let it cool just a bit, Juicy Lucy is a really good variant on the cheeseburger. Good thinking. Thank you. Kevin Broderick, thoughts about separating flat from point before cook? Burnt ends and beef ribs, best bite in barbecue. Kevin, I am slowly coming around to separating. I've been doing it for years, but I've been hesitant to say it's better, but I'm starting to think it is. I mean, the whole concept, core concept in cooking is thickness is what matters. A turkey breast is thicker than a turkey thigh, and it takes longer to cook because it's thicker. Thick steak takes longer than a thin steak. And a brisket has this big lump at one end, which is very thick, where the two muscles, the flat and the point, sit on top of each other. And then the flat tapers off, and rather the point tapers out, and the whole thing tapers down. So you've got this kind of teardrop or pear-shaped hunk of meat. And it's very thick on one end and thin on the other end. And so if you cook it together, it's extremely hard to get it right. And you usually end up with overcooked tip. And that's where the original burnt ends came from. And, you know, if you separate the point from the flat, you get two muscles that are closer to uniform. I mean, the point, or rather the flat. The flat is almost perfectly uniform. So it's going to cook really evenly. And you're going to get a much better result, I think. Now, the problem with the flat is that it's fairly lean, and you've got to work very carefully to make sure you don't get it dried out. And the point sitting on top of it helps keep it moist. You take that point off, and you've got to work harder to make sure the flat stays tender and juicy. But it's not that hard. Now you take the point off. It's not perfectly even in thickness. It's kind of mountainous. But it's an entirely different muscle. It's got much more fat, and it cooks much more differently. And it's just a much better muscle, tasting-wise. So there's a lot to be said for taking the two apart. Absolutely. Some of it will have to do with how good a cooker you've got and how good a cooker you are. And you might want to try it a few times and see which works out better for you on your machine. But I've been separating them more and more, and I've been happy with the results.
So, Meathead, have you ever eaten Brahma hump from a Brahma cow?
No, I have. You mean a Brahma bull?
Yeah.
No, I have never eaten a Brahma. Have you?
Yes.
I
ate it in Brazil. I ate it in Brazil, and they brought it to you on a skewer, and they sliced it off. And it was probably some of the most delicate meat I had ever eaten in my life. I kid you not, because I thought, hey, I'm an old cowboy. I just thought, God, that thing's got to be just gristle, you know?
Is it lean?
And not really. It certainly wasn't Wagyu, but I mean, it was pretty well marbled, you could tell, but it was really delicate. I was surprised. You know, I'm not sure these were old rodeo bulls, but
when you go into the grocery stores, do they have like a display that says Brahma hump? You know, it's all one muscle.
I really didn't see that in there in Brazil. I didn't really go into grocery stores, but I went to these. I'm trying to think of it. It's called a churrasca. I'm not saying it right.
Now I know how to pronounce it. You just screwed me up.
Churrascaria, yeah, and it's wonderful. You know, they were big on tri-tips before we got really hot on tri-tips up here in this country.
Can you age the stuff?
Brahma hump down there.
Can you age the stuff?
The Brahma hump?
Yeah.
You know, that's a good question, because I think it's probably pretty well aged before you get it off the bull.
JT, I'm setting you up for one of your famous stories. For crying out loud, I just set you up perfectly for your famous story about the hump in the freezer.
Yes, I'm going to that, but I thought I'd back with you a little bit.
For crying out loud.
So
now I know how Ed McMahon felt.
So I've been doing BBQ Nation for going on to about 7 years now. And the very first show I did, I got an email from a guy that wanted me to give him advice on how to cook a buffalo hump. The part that was really tricky was he'd had this in his freezer for 5 years. Now, when we cleaned out my mom's freezer before we left the farm, we found razor clams in there from 1962. So there was an aging process, like we're saying there. But the only thing I could advise him to do was either go out in the backyard and bury this buffalo hump, or just give it to Republic Services, which is our, waste management people around here, and throw it away. I could not come up with the life of me of what you would do with that.
No, I think
it's got to have freezer burn and all kinds of stuff in it, and it's got to be tougher than hell to begin with. So,
oh God, yes.
I probably lost my first listener that way, on the show, but that's what I told him. Just chuck it, man. Don't even bother. Chuck it. And it won't, it's not Chuck. It's not Chuck. It's Buffalo, So, anyway. It's, what would you do with it if you had it?
I'd throw it out too.
Yeah.
Big Al is buzzing out. He says, I'm glad I didn't bring up Justin Fields and Andy Dalton. That sounds like he's a Chicago boy, like me. Kevin Broderick asks, what are your best barbecue bites? I'll pass this to you. That'll give me a chance to think.
I think when people come by the grill and I can slice off a little piece of tri-tip for them. I'm a big tri-tip fan, okay? And it's a very easy piece of meat to cook, and it can be very juicy and very tender, and I'm sure people are all well aware of that. But when you hand them a little piece of tri-tip and they bite into it and they go, ooh, they give you some really positive feedback on that. I think that's probably the best that I've experienced from all the different things I've cooked. I think the tri-tip, just cutting off a little piece, give it to them, and they go nuts, and then they're ready to eat dinner.
I like the idea of slicing off a little taste on the grill for people. That sounds like fun. I've done that for some folks. Usually I just do it for myself. But I mean, if we're sticking with barbecue bites, one of the first things that comes to my mind, and it sticks there, is some kind of burnt ends. Either brisket burnt ends, which is beef, or pork belly burnt ends. And if you do them right, they're really soft and succulent and fatty in the center, and they just bursting with juice. And you can roll them around in sauce so they get that sweetness. And if you do them right, they're crispy on the outside. The edges can be really kind of almost crunchy. And I love making banh mi sandwiches out of them, which is just a Vietnamese style hoagie. But you put them on a really good French bread roll, and you can throw in some Asian radishes, some wasabi, whatever you want. And they're really great sandwiches. But just as bites, finger food, I can't think of much better.
No, I really, I think anything like that, like if you're doing brisket, you got the burnt ends, pork belly, whatever. I think you can kind of trick people too, because it's right off the grill, like you said, and it's hot, and you're giving it to them, and if they want to dip it in a little sauce or whatever, That's really good. But I found that when you kind of just slice off a little wafer thin piece of tri-tip and hand it to them, because I cook it a lot. It's that, and there's no real sauce on it or anything. There's rub on it, but there's no sauce, and they bite into it, and it's juicy and it's warm, and they really enjoy it.
Something else just popped into my mind.
Sure.
A little off the beaten path. Octopus. I love grilling octopus. You got to tenderize it first, and I've settled upon sous videing it first. You sous vide it, that cooks it through, and it comes out very tender, and then you throw it on the grill, and you get it. And it has in common with the burn ends that business about being soft and tender in the center, mm-hmm. and crunchy on the edges. That's a combination that I'm a sucker for. I mean, I really like crispy and crunchy. I want that in almost everything I eat. And you get those tentacles, and they're a little charred and crunchy, and I really like that.
It's kind of like the wonton of barbecue.
Yeah. Well, guys, we have just about run out of questions from the crowd, and I'm getting a little tired and wasted. Some of you may have heard that something special happened to me yesterday. I found out yesterday.
Let me do this.
I've been
elected. Let me do this.
Pardon?
Let me do this. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you, from the class of 2021, the latest inductee into the Barbecue Hall of Fame, Meathead Goldwyn. Everybody give him a golf clap.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
It's quite an honor. There are only about 25 living members. In my induction class is the immortal Arthur Bryant, and Ollie Gates from Gates Barbecue in Kansas City. Gates and Bryant's both coming in at the same time with me. And there was a Rodney Scott, the whole hog genius from Charleston, South Carolina. If you have not seen Netflix's Chef's Table Barbecue, you have to watch that. It's a Chef's Table itself is just a brilliant series, but they did a special segment of it called Chef's Table Barbecue, which they featured Rodney Scott and Tootsie Tominets out of Texas, and I can't remember the gentleman's name out of Australia, but he's a brilliant cook. Everything in the restaurant is grilled or smoked, and his setup is amazing. But Rodney Scott is featured on that. And then I'm drawing a blank on the woman's name, but she's long deceased. She ran a couple of 3 barbecue stores in Shelby, North Carolina, and they are still run by women in her family. And so she is a female pioneer. The restaurants, I think, are called Bridges, and that's her last name, I think, Bridges. So 5 people inducted to the Barbecue Hall of Fame. I am the least of the crowd, but I'm not turning it down, and I'm honored to be elected. The induction ceremony is going to be in September at the Kansas City Royal. They sponsor the Hall of Fame. And since there was no induction ceremony last year, 2 classes will be inducted simultaneously. And among the inductees from last year is the immortal Aaron Franklin from Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas. And, from Cozy Corner. Oh, God, I'm an old man and my mind is going blank. She's the most gracious lady in barbecue, but she owns and runs Cozy Corner Restaurant in Memphis, and I'll think of her name shortly. But it's an honor, and thank you very much for introducing me.
I told you weren't going to end up like Susan Lucci.
Yeah, I had been nominated twice in the past and hadn't been elected, so I was starting to think I was Susan Lucci. But okay, guys, I think I need a nap. It's been a long 2 days, and I got to go yell at Facebook or try to do something with it. JT, it's always fun hanging out with you. We are long overdue for just perching in a bar for a few hours until they carry us out. There's no better storyteller in the world of barbecue, and we really didn't tap into that today. Maybe that's what we need to do, is do this again, and what I'll do is I'll throw out a name.
Okay.
Aaron Franklin, and you tell a story, because I know you got stories about everybody. And if you're a member of the Pitmaster Club on AmazingRibs.com, we post a number of his interviews in the Pitmaster Club as a benefit to membership. I try to get a new one up every month, so go down there and check it out.
Well,
Otherwise,
they can also, let me jump in here for a second. Our show for this weekend drops tomorrow, and so it will be, and you and I did that show together, and the After Hours. The After Hours is not available on the radio.
That's a great
point. Yeah, and so that's the second part that jumps out about a day later, and there's always great stuff with Meathead in there when he's on the show with me. So all you have to do is go to BBQNationJT.com, and you can find it there. You can find it on Captivate, SoundCloud, all those places.
And I also am obligated to mention, we had scheduled a really fun conference for backyard cooks in Memphis in August, but because COVID was still concerning to so many people, we canceled it and moved it to March 18 through 20. So it's on, and we're go from March 18 through 20. Just go to AmazingRibs.com/Memphis to see the schedule. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some really good speakers, and there's never been an event like this for consumers. There's a trade conference, but we should have a lot of fun. It's our first time doing this, and we're balls to the wall on it. We're going to have a blast. Okay, everybody. I got to get some sleep. Thanks, JT. Thank you, folks, for coming out. And the recording of this will be on YouTube, and I'll try to get it up on Facebook. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks.